The endless void of space hung silent and cold around the HSS Defiance. Once, it had been just one ship among hundreds in humanity's proud fleet. Now, it drifted alone, the last true warship Earth had left. Captain Robert wiped sweat from his brow as he stared at the main view screen. The blue-green marble of Earth looked smaller than ever before, surrounded by the debris of fallen ships. His ship, outdated and battle-scarred, was all that stood between humanity and total defeat. "Captain, incoming transmission," called Officer Ben from his station. "It's them again." Robert's jaw tightened. "Put it through." The screen flickered, revealing the face of their tormentor. The alien commander had rough, gray-blue skin with ridges where eyebrows would be on a human. This was Lord Dex of the Crest, the species that had appeared 3 years ago with technology far beyond Earth's understanding. Captain of the primitive vessel, the alien's voice boomed through the speakers, its translator giving perfect but emotionless English. "Your resistance grows tedious. Your world burns. Your fleet is destroyed. And yet you persist with this obsolete container of metal." The bridge crew stiffened. The Defiance might be old, but she was their home, their last hope. "Your ship is worthy only of ridicule," continued Lord Dex. "We discuss among ourselves how it still functions. Perhaps we should preserve it in a museum after your extinction, to show how far inferior species can progress before meeting their betters." Robert kept his face neutral. "We're still here, Dex. That's more than you expected." The aliens' expression didn't change, their faces weren't built for human expressions, but the tone shifted to one of amusement. "A temporary oversight. One we shall correct shortly." The transmission cut off. Officer Ben looked up from his station. "They're moving their fleet into position. Looks like they're finally getting serious." Robert turned to his crew. 20 faces, tired and worn from 3 years of running, fighting, and watching friends die. They represented the best of what remained of Earth's space forces. Their uniforms were patched, their equipment jury-rigged, but their spirits remained unbroken. "Send word to Earth. Tell them we're moving to intercept," Robert ordered. "Sir," spoke Mary, his second-in-command, voice low. "We can't take on their whole fleet. We don't have to win. We just have to buy time." Robert pushed himself from his chair. "All we need to do is show them we're not finished yet." In the lower decks of the Defiance, engineering was a hive of frantic activity. Chief Engineer Tom was elbow-deep in the ship's power core, while his assistant Lisa studied ancient schematics spread across a workbench. "Look at this," Lisa suddenly whispered, pointing to a faded section of blueprint. "This power routing, it doesn't go anywhere in the current systems." Tom pulled himself from the machinery, wiping grease on his already stained uniform. He squinted at the old paper. "That's odd. Wait. That section was supposed to be experimental. It was never completed. But what was it for?" Lisa traced the lines with her finger. "Weapon systems." Tom's voice dropped lower. "Advanced weapon systems that were deemed too power-hungry to be practical. The project was abandoned before the Defiance was commissioned." Lisa looked up, eyes widening. "Could we complete it?" "With what?" "We barely have parts to keep the lights on," Tom scoffed, but his mind was already racing with possibilities. "We have wreckage," Lisa said. "From both our ships and theirs. What if there's something there we could use?" On the bridge, Robert received a call from engineering. As Tom explained what they'd found, a tiny flame of hope, dangerous but impossible to ignore, flickered in his chest. "How long?" he asked. "Days, at minimum," Tom replied. "If it works at all." Robert looked at the tactical display showing the approaching Crest fleet. "We might not have days." "Then we'll need a distraction," Mary suggested from beside him. "Something to keep them talking instead of firing." Robert nodded slowly. I'll open negotiations. Make them think we're ready to surrender. Sir, if this doesn't work, Ben began. Then we die fighting, as humans always have, Robert finished. But if it does work? He didn't need to complete the thought. If it worked, humanity might have a chance after all. A slim one, but better than none. As the crew hurried to their tasks, the mocking transmission from the crest played again in Robert's mind. They thought the Defiance was just an obsolete relic, worthy only of ridicule. Soon, they might learn how dangerous it was to underestimate human determination. Outside, against the blackness of space, the Defiance's engines flared to life, a single point of light facing the overwhelming darkness of the enemy fleet. The Defiance trembled as another near-miss from crest weapons rattled through its hull. In engineering, Tom and Lisa worked frantically, their hands moving with practiced speed despite the occasional violent shake of the ship. "Hand me that power coupling," Tom called out, pointing to a salvaged piece they'd retrieved from a destroyed Earth vessel last week. The component was never meant for the Defiance, but they were long past following proper protocols. Lisa passed it over. "Will it hold?" "It has to," Tom replied grimly, fitting the coupling into the half-assembled weapon system. "The captain can't keep them talking forever." On the bridge, Robert maintained a carefully composed expression as Lord Dex's face filled the main screen again. The alien commander had been surprisingly willing to entertain surrender talks, clearly enjoying the opportunity to gloat over humanity's imminent defeat. "Your terms are interesting," Dex said, the translator giving his voice a metallic quality. "You wish to preserve human culture in exchange for technological submission." "We're a practical species," Robert replied evenly. "We recognize superior technology when we see it." Mary stood behind the captain's chair, her face deliberately blank. She knew Robert was lying through his teeth. Humanity would never willingly submit, but the aliens didn't understand human deception well enough to notice. "A wise choice," Dex continued. "Your species has certain qualities that might make you useful servants. Not like the others we've encountered." Robert's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on his armrest. "Others? You didn't think you were the first, did you?" Dex's face shifted in what might have been their version of amusement. "Dozens of species have stood where you stand now. All made the same choice eventually." The revelation hit the bridge crew hard. They weren't the first to face this threat, just the latest in a long line of conquered civilizations. In the ship's cargo bay, a small team led by Officer Ben sorted through alien debris they'd collected during previous skirmishes. Most of it was useless, fragments too damaged to study, but occasionally they found intact components. "What about this?" asked James, the youngest crew member, holding up a glowing crystal-like object. Ben took it carefully. "Power source, maybe? Take it to engineering immediately." James hurried through the corridors, the strange alien artifact cradled in his hands. As he turned a corner, he nearly collided with Officer Frank, a man who kept to himself and had joined the crew only months before the crest arrived. "Careful with that," Frank said, eyeing the artifact. "What is it?" "Something for engineering," James replied, suddenly uneasy without knowing why. "Tom needs it for repairs." Frank's eyes narrowed slightly. "I could take it there for you. I'm heading that way." "No thanks," James clutched the object tighter. "Captain wants me to deliver it personally." The older man shrugged and continued down the corridor, but James couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He hurried faster toward engineering. When James arrived, Tom's eyes widened at the sight of the crystal. "Where did you get this?" "Found it in the debris we collected last month," James explained. "Is it useful?" Tom turned the object carefully in his hands. "This could be exactly what we need. Their power generation technology is exponentially more efficient than ours. If we can integrate it." Lisa leaned in. "Could it power the weapon?" Not just power it, Tom said quietly. It could amplify it beyond anything the original designers imagined. Back on the bridge, Robert continued the delicate dance of pretending to negotiate while buying time. We require 12 more hours to prepare our people for the transition, he told Dex, inventing reasons for delay. The alien commander's patience was visibly wearing thin. You have already been granted significant time. Perhaps you mistake our willingness to accept your surrender as weakness? Not at all, Robert assured him. We simply want to ensure an orderly transition. As the conversation continued, Mary received a message on her personal tablet. It was from Ben, possible security breach. Frank asking questions about the project. Mary carefully kept her expression neutral as she moved to whisper in Robert's ear. Sir, we may have a problem. In engineering, Tom and Lisa had successfully integrated the alien crystal into the experimental weapon system. The power readings were beyond anything they'd expected, or could fully control. If this works, Tom said, staring at the pulsing energy readings, we might have a chance after all. Lisa nodded, her face illuminated by the eerie glow of alien technology merged with human engineering. And if it doesn't? Tom gave a tired smile. Then at least we go out on our terms, not theirs. Throughout the ship, the crew of the Defiance prepared for what might be their final stand. Whatever happened next would determine not just their fate, but that of humanity itself. Outside, the Crest fleet had fully surrounded them, their massive ships dwarfing the lone human vessel. They were still unaware that the obsolete warship they had mocked now housed a weapon unlike anything they had ever faced. They're coming, Officer Ben announced, his voice tight as he monitored the tactical display. All Crest ships are powering weapons. Captain Robert stood from his chair, eyes fixed on the approaching alien fleet. The negotiations had bought them nearly 10 hours, not the 12 he'd asked for, but perhaps enough. Engineering, status report, he called over the ship's comm. Tom's voice came back, strained but determined. We're as ready as we'll ever be, Captain. The weapon is online, but untested. We have no idea what will happen when we fire it. Understood. Robert turned to his crew. Battle stations. Mary, set course for the asteroid field in Sector 7. Mary looked up in surprise. The asteroids? Sir, that's suicide with their numbers. Exactly what they'll think, Robert replied. They'll assume we're desperate and cornered, which we are. But those asteroids will give us cover and limit their ability to surround us. As the Defiance's engines fired up, the main screen flickered to life again. Lord Dex appeared, his alien features set in what the crew had learned to recognize as contempt. Captain of the Defiance, he began, your delays have grown tiresome. We detect your engines activating. Do you flee after offering surrender? Robert smiled thinly. Not fleeing, Lord Dex. Merely relocating to more favorable terrain. The alien commander made a sound that the translator didn't process, something between a laugh and a hiss. There is no favorable terrain for you, human. Your pathetic vessel cannot hope to stand against our might. Then you have nothing to worry about, Robert replied calmly. Follow us if you wish to finish this. The transmission cut off abruptly. Moments later, the Crest fleet began to move, pursuing the lone human ship as it raced toward the asteroid field. In engineering, Tom and Lisa made final adjustments to their cobbled-together weapon system. The alien crystal pulsed with increasing intensity, its blue-white light casting strange shadows across the machinery. Power levels are still climbing, Lisa reported, watching the readings with growing concern. I'm not sure we can contain this much energy. Tom wiped sweat from his forehead. We don't need to contain it, we just need to direct it. The ship shuddered as it entered the asteroid field, massive space rocks creating a natural maze around them. Robert ordered evasive maneuvers, watching as the Crest fleet split into smaller groups to pursue them through the field. "Sir," Ben called out, "Officer Frank is missing from his station." Robert's eyes narrowed. "Find him. Now." Two security officers hurried from the bridge, weapons drawn. The possibility of a traitor aboard had been a growing concern since Mary's warning. The Defiance dove deeper into the asteroid field, the helmsmen threading their way through narrow gaps with skill born of desperation. Behind them, several smaller crest ships followed, while their larger vessels held position at the edge of the field. "They're splitting their forces," Mary observed. "Sending in the smaller ships first." Robert nodded. "As expected. They think we're cornered prey." He tapped his comm. "Engineering, how much longer?" 2 minutes, Captain," Tom replied. "But we've got another problem. The security system on the weapon bay has been tampered with." Before Robert could respond, a ship-wide alert sounded. "Intruder in engineering section," came the automated announcement. In the weapon bay, Frank moved quickly, a small device in his hand. His true loyalties had been with the Crest from the beginning, one of many sleeper agents they had placed among humans years before their invasion. His mission: ensure the Defiance posed no threat. He was about to attach the sabotage device when the door slid open. James stood there, eyes widening in betrayal. "Frank? What are you?" Frank lunged, but James was younger and faster. The two men grappled, crashing into equipment as they fought. The sabotage device skittered across the floor. On the bridge, Robert received the alert about the confrontation. "We're out of time," he told Mary. "Get us into position." The Defiance spun around a massive asteroid, coming to face the pursuing Crest ships head-on. For a moment, both sides seemed surprised by the sudden change in tactics. "Weapon status?" Robert demanded. "Online," came Tom's voice, breathless. James managed to stop Frank. The sabotage failed. "Target the lead Crest vessel," Robert ordered. "Fire when ready." In engineering, Tom took a deep breath and activated the experimental weapon. The alien crystal flared blindingly bright, channeling power through systems never designed to handle such energy. The front of the Defiance began to glow, a building wave of energy unlike anything the crew had seen before. Then, with a sound that seemed to shake reality itself, the weapon fired. A beam of intense blue-white energy lanced out from the human ship, cutting through space toward the lead Crest vessel. When it hit, the alien ship didn't simply explode, it seemed to fold in on itself, its structure collapsing as though reality itself rejected its existence. On the bridge, the crew watched in stunned silence as the Crest ship vanished. Two nearby alien vessels, caught in the edge of the beam, spun out of control, their systems apparently fried by proximity alone. For the first time since the war began, it was the Crest who fled. Lord Dex's voice, when it came through on the comm, had lost all mockery. "What have you done?" he demanded, genuine fear in his translated voice. "What is that weapon?" Robert didn't answer. He simply stared at the spot where the alien ship had been, realizing that the balance of power had just shifted dramatically. Humanity's last warship had just become the most feared vessel in the galaxy. The mood aboard the Defiance had transformed overnight. Where once there had been only grim determination in the face of inevitable defeat, now a cautious hope spread through the corridors. Crew members walked with straighter backs, spoke with firmer voices. They had struck back, and struck hard. In the makeshift war room, Captain Roberts studied the tactical displays with Mary and his senior officers. The Crest fleet had pulled back to a defensive position, their usual aggressive tactics replaced by wary observation. "They're scared," Ben said, analyzing the enemy formations. "Look at this, they've positioned their largest ships as a barrier between us and their command vessel." Robert nodded. "Fear is useful, but it makes them unpredictable. We need to press our advantage before they develop countermeasures." "If they can," Mary added. We barely understand how our own weapon works. The door slid open, and Tom entered, dark circles under his eyes from days without proper sleep. The good news is, the weapon is still functional. The bad news is, we have no idea why. He placed a data tablet on the table, showing readings from their latest tests. The alien crystal isn't just powering the weapon, it's evolving it. The energy output has increased by 27% since our first firing, and the emission pattern is changing. Evolving? Robert frowned. You mean it's learning? Tom ran a hand through his disheveled hair. That's one way to put it. It's as if the technology is adapting to our ship's systems, integrating in ways we never programmed. A tense silence fell over the room. They had created something they didn't fully understand. There's more, Tom continued. We've been receiving transmissions from human outposts that we thought were destroyed. Mars Colony, Europa Station, even the lunar bases, they're all still there, just in hiding. The news sent a ripple of excitement through the officers. Humanity wasn't down to just Earth and the Defiance after all. They've been monitoring Crest communications, Tom explained. And they've located what appears to be the aliens' homeworld. Robert's eyes narrowed. How far? 3 days at maximum speed, Tom replied. And with the Crest fleet currently disorganized. We could strike directly at their heart, Mary finished, her voice a mix of awe and concern. Robert studied the star chart Tom had brought. A direct attack on the Crest homeworld would be audacious, perhaps foolhardy, but with their new weapon, it might just be possible. What about power requirements? He asked. Can we make the journey and still have enough to use the weapon? Tom nodded. The crystal seems to regenerate energy. The more we use it, the stronger it gets. I don't like this, Ben said suddenly. We're talking about taking a weapon we barely understand to attack an enemy's homeworld. This isn't a military strike anymore, it's potentially genocide. The word hung heavy in the air. Until now, they had been fighting for survival. This would be something else entirely. We should contact Earth, Mary suggested. Get authorization before we proceed. Robert shook his head. Communications are too risky. The Crest could intercept them. He looked around at his officers' faces. This decision is mine to make. The responsibility is mine alone. Meanwhile, aboard the Crest command vessel, Lord Dex faced his own council. The massive chamber was filled with the Empire's highest military leaders, all demanding explanations for their unprecedented defeat. One human ship, hissed Supreme Commander Vex, the eldest and most decorated of the Crest leadership. One obsolete vessel has made fools of our entire fleet. Dex bowed his head in submission. The weapon they used was unlike anything in our records. It appears to bend space itself. Impossible, another counselor declared. Their technology is primitive. They must have discovered one of the ancient devices. The ancient devices, relics of a civilization that had preceded even the Crest, were the stuff of legend. Most believe them myths. Whatever the source, Dex said, we must develop a defense. I propose sacrificing the research colony in the Theta system. If we can lure the human ship there, we can study the weapon in action. Vex's eyes narrowed. You would sacrifice thousands of our kind? To save billions, yes, Dex replied without hesitation. The alternative is to wait for them to grow bolder. Their kind always does. After heated debate, the council agreed. A fake withdrawal would be staged, leaving the Theta colony seemingly undefended, a tempting target for the humans. Back on the Defiance, Robert made his decision. Set course for the Crest homeworld, he ordered. But first, we'll make a stop at the Theta system. Our intelligence suggests they have a weakly defended research outpost there, a perfect target to test our weapon at full capacity. As the human ship prepared to jump to lightspeed, neither side realized they were playing directly into the other's plans. The Defiance, humanity's last hope, was about to fly straight into a trap. But it carried a weapon that even its trap setters couldn't comprehend. The next phase of the war had begun, and the stakes had never been higher. The Defiance dropped out of lightspeed at the edge of the Theta system, its engines humming with energy drawn from the mysterious crystal. On the bridge, Captain Robert studied the seemingly undefended Crest colony on the main view screen. Something felt wrong. No patrol ships, he muttered. No defensive platforms. It's too easy. Mary nodded in agreement. Definitely a trap. But what kind? Robert pondered. Scan for energy signatures, anything unusual. Ben worked his console rapidly. Nothing obvious, Captain. But there's heavy interference coming from the colony itself. They could be hiding something. Robert made his decision. We'll maintain distance and test the weapon's range. Target their main research facility but stay outside their defensive perimeter. Throughout the ship, battle stations were called. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, but tension filled the air. Everyone knew the stakes had changed. This wasn't just about survival anymore, they were taking the fight directly to the enemy. In engineering, Tom monitored the weapon's power levels with growing concern. The alien crystal pulsed with increasing intensity, its blue-white glow now shot through with strands of crimson. Lisa, are you seeing this? He called to his assistant. She looked up from her station, eyes widening. The energy pattern is changing again. It's becoming more complex. Tom ran a diagnostic. Power output is now 200% of our original firing. If this keeps increasing at the current rate, we won't be able to control it, Lisa finished quietly. The ship moved into firing position, still maintaining a cautious distance from the colony. On the bridge, Robert gave the order. Weapons hot. Target locked. Fire when ready. In engineering, Tom activated the firing sequence. The crystal flared brilliantly, energy cascading through the ship's systems. But something was different this time. Warning alarms blared as power readings spiked far beyond expected levels. Captain, we have a problem. Tom's voice came urgently over the comm, the weapon is drawing more power than we can safely channel. Before Robert could respond, the weapon fired. The beam that lanced out from the Defiance was different from before, darker, almost purple in color, and visibly distorting the space around it. When it struck the colony, the effects were catastrophic. Instead of destroying just the targeted facility, the beam seemed to tear into reality itself. A sphere of destruction expanded outward, consuming not just buildings but the very ground beneath them. My God, Mary whispered, watching the colony disintegrate. As the sphere of destruction grew, the ship's sensors detected numerous small craft suddenly launching from hidden bunkers around the colony, evacuation ships filled with Crest civilians. They knew we were coming, Ben realized aloud. This was a research colony, but they evacuated their military. Those are civilians. Robert's face hardened. Cease fire. Cut power to the weapon immediately. In engineering, Tom and his team fought desperately to shut down the system, but the crystal had integrated too deeply. It's not responding to the shutdown sequence. Tom shouted over the alarms. The crystal is feeding on itself now, creating its own power loop. As the weapon continued to fire, tearing apart the Theta colony, a transmission cut through on all frequencies. Lord Dex's face appeared on the main screen, his alien features twisted in what could only be described as cruel satisfaction. Captain Robert, he began, I see you've discovered our research colony. What you may not realize is its purpose. The screen split to show rows of containment pods. Inside each one was a human child. We've been studying your young, Dex continued. Learning your weaknesses from the beginning. This colony houses 300 of your offspring, taken from your outlying settlements years ago. Horror spread across the bridge as the implications became clear. The weapon was destroying not just Crest researchers but human children as well. You monster, Robert breathed. You're using them as shields. A test, Dex corrected. To see if humans would sacrifice their own young to destroy their enemy. Now we know the answer. In engineering, Tom made a desperate decision. The weapon couldn't be shut down, the crystal had become too powerful, too integrated. But perhaps its energy could be redirected. Lisa, help me modify the focusing array, he ordered. If we can't stop it, we can change where it fires. Working frantically, they rerouted power conduits, burning their hands on overheating components. The ship shuddered violently as the weapon's energy threatened to tear it apart from within. There's only one way to control this now, Tom realized, looking at the main power junction. Someone has to manually stabilize the flow at the source. Lisa understood immediately. That's a suicide mission. The radiation alone would. I know, Tom cut her off. Get everyone out of engineering. Now. On the bridge, Robert faced an impossible choice. Continuing the attack meant sacrificing innocent human children. Aborting meant letting the Crest escape with their research that would help them defeat humanity once and for all. Before he could decide, Tom's voice came over the comm, "Captain, I've redirected the weapon. You have 30 seconds to give me new coordinates before I can't hold it any longer." "Tom, what have you done?" Robert demanded. "What's necessary," came the strained reply. "The weapon can't be stopped now, but I can aim it." "Where do you want it to go?" Robert locked eyes with Mary, then looked back at the screen where Dex still watched, smug in his perceived victory. "Target the Crest homeworld," Robert ordered, his voice cold and final. "Coordinates are being sent now." As Tom received the coordinates, he made his final adjustments. The radiation was already affecting him, his vision blurring, skin burning. With the last of his strength, he locked in the targeting system and collapsed against the controls. The Defiance's weapon energy surged one final time, then shot away from the Theta system, a beam of terrifying power now aimed directly at the heart of Crest civilization. Lord Dex's face showed genuine fear for the first time. "What have you done?" he demanded. "What you forced us to do," Robert answered quietly. "May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on your species. Because we won't." The transmission cut off as Dex presumably rushed to warn his homeworld. But Robert knew it would be too late. The weapon's energy traveled faster than any communication. As the bridge crew watched in somber silence, the weapon's beam disappeared into the distance, carrying with it the fate of an entire civilization. 6 months after the Defiance fired its final shot, Captain Robert stood before the United Earth Military Tribunal. The Grand Chamber, once a concert hall before the war, was packed with representatives from every surviving human settlement. Some had traveled for weeks to witness this historic proceeding. "Captain Robert," began the lead judge, an austere woman with silver hair, "you stand accused of exceeding your authority by authorizing the use of a weapon of mass destruction against the Crest homeworld without direct orders from Earth Command. How do you plead?" Robert stood straight, his uniform pressed and formal despite the weight that had settled on his shoulders since that fateful day. "Guilty of the action," he replied, his voice carrying through the silent hall. "But I acted in defense of our species and would do so again." The murmurs that swept through the crowd were neither entirely approving nor condemning. Humanity remained divided on what Robert and his crew had done. The facts were these: the weapon's beam had struck the Crest homeworld with devastating effect. Unlike conventional weapons, the crystal-powered beam had not simply destroyed, it had unmade. Reports from scout ships described a planet partially collapsed in on itself, as though reality itself had been warped. Of the billions of Crest who had lived there, none remained. An entire species, one that had conquered dozens of worlds before Earth, had been effectively erased from the galaxy in a single strike. The court acknowledges your motivations, the judge continued. But we must consider the implications. You wielded a power beyond our understanding and used it to commit what many would classify as genocide. Mary stood from her place among the witnesses. If I may address the court, she requested. When granted permission, she stepped forward. The crest gave us no choice. We discovered after the fact that they had done this before, wiped out at least 7 other civilizations that refused to submit. They were holding human children hostage. They would have destroyed Earth just as thoroughly, only more slowly. The evidence supporting Mary's claims had been recovered from the Theta colony's partially intact databases. The crest's history of conquest and extinction was long and methodical. Earth would have been just another entry in their record. As the tribunal continued, across the solar system, humanity was rebuilding. The crest threat eliminated, human colonies that had hidden themselves during the war emerged from obscurity. Some had developed their own technologies, adapted to survive in isolation. Earth was no longer the sole center of human civilization. On Mars colony, Lisa oversaw the research team studying fragments of the crystal recovered from the Defiance. The ship itself had been quarantined, its power core too dangerous to approach even months after the final firing. The energy signatures are still evolving, she explained to her team, pointing to readings on a display. Even separated from the main crystal, these fragments continue to change. Whatever this technology is, it wasn't created, it was grown. Back in the tribunal, Robert faced his final question. Do you believe the extinction of the crest was justified? The judge asked. Robert paused, weighing his words carefully. I believe survival often requires terrible choices. The crest gave us only 2 options, submit to extinction or fight with everything we had. He looked up, meeting the judge's eyes. But I also believe that power of this magnitude comes with responsibility. The weapon we discovered should never be used again. The tribunal's decision, when it came 3 days later, reflected the complexity of the situation. Robert was relieved of command but honored for his service. The Defiance was to be permanently decommissioned, sealed within a containment field where its dangerous power core could harm no one. As Robert stood on the observation deck of Earth's orbital station, watching as engineers prepared the Defiance for its final resting place, Mary joined him. Was it worth it? She asked quietly. Robert watched his ship, the last warship, now the most notorious vessel in human history, as it was slowly encased in warning beacons and containment fields. Ask me in 100 years, he replied. When we see what humanity becomes after this. The crystal's technology had already begun spreading, its principles being adapted for peaceful purposes, energy production, medical applications, faster-than-light travel. Humanity was advancing rapidly, incorporating aspects of technology recovered from former crest territories. The children from the Theta colony, Mary said. The rescue teams found most of them alive. Robert nodded, a rare smile crossing his face. That, at least, is something worth celebrating. As they stood watching, a message arrived from Earth. The tribunal's final judgment included one additional element. The story of the Defiance would be taught to all future generations, not as a tale of military glory, but as a somber reminder of the responsibility that comes with power. The last human warship, once mocked by an arrogant enemy, had indeed wiped a species from history. But in doing so, it had forced humanity to confront a profound question: now that they wielded such terrible power, what kind of species would they choose to become? They called us primitive, Robert said softly. Perhaps in some ways we were. But they never understood that humans don't just fight to win, we fight to survive. The Defiance, now sealed away, would trouble the galaxy no more. But its legacy, both the horror and the hope it represented, would shape humanity's path among the stars for centuries to come. A new chapter had begun, written in the aftermath of humanity's darkest hour and most terrible victory.